The mansion was silent, but Sophie could still hear their laughter echoing in her mind, sharp, cruel, unforgettable. To the world, Vivian was the perfect wife, and Bella, the perfect daughter. But behind those polished smiles and glittering parties, Sophie lived in a prison built of whispers, lies, and the color of her skin. Before we dive in, where are you watching this from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. Drop your location in the comments and let's see how far Sophie's story travels. And don't forget to hit that like button, because stories like this, they deserve to be heard. Sophie had learned to keep her head down, to make herself invisible in the only home she had left. Since her mother's death 3 years ago, her father had remarried quickly, too quickly, and Vivian had taken full control of the house. At first, Sophie had tried. She had smiled through the pain, forced herself to believe that maybe this new family could be her family too. But hope has a way of dying quietly, and in that mansion, hope had been strangled by Vivian's quiet malice and Bella's open cruelty. Vivian had a way of looking at her that made Sophie's skin crawl, as if her very existence was an inconvenience. She was 17 now, old enough to understand that Vivian hadn't just married her father for love. It was for the money, the status, the control. And Sophie, with her mother's warm brown skin and kind almond eyes, was a reminder that Vivian would never truly own this house or this family. "Good morning," Sophie whispered as she stepped into the kitchen, clutching her notebook to her chest. Bella's laugh sliced through the room like glass. She was perched on the marble counter, her long legs crossed, phone in hand. "Good morning," she mimicked, her voice sharp and mocking. "Look, Mom, the charity case speaks." Vivian didn't look up from her coffee. She stirred it slowly, deliberately, as if Sophie hadn't spoken at all. Sophie swallowed hard, forcing the lump in her throat down. She turned toward the pantry, hoping to grab a piece of toast and disappear before the day really began. But Bella wasn't done. "Careful with the silverware," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We wouldn't want anything disappearing again, would we?" Heat rushed to Sophie's cheeks. She froze, her fingers gripping the edge of the counter. It had started a month ago, the quiet suggestions, the subtle glances whenever something went missing. A cufflink. A small gold pin. Even a pair of earrings Vivian claimed she hadn't seen in years. It didn't matter that Sophie never touched those things. In this house, her innocence meant nothing. Vivian finally looked up, her icy blue eyes meeting Sophie's. "Bella," she said mildly, though her smile never reached her eyes. "Be kind." Bella smirked. "I am being kind. I'm just saying, Mom, if things keep disappearing, maybe we should start checking closets." The implication was clear. Sophie felt it like a slap, sharp and humiliating. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, her heart hammering in her chest. Upstairs, in the solitude of her room, Sophie sank onto her bed, her notebook falling from her hands. She stared at the ceiling, fighting the sting of tears. She hated crying. Crying gave them power. But some nights, when the house was quiet and her father was away on yet another business trip, she couldn't stop the sobs that shook her chest. She missed her mother. She missed the warmth, the laughter, the safety. She missed being seen as someone who mattered. Her room, though spacious and elegant, felt like a cell. The walls were painted a soft cream, the curtains a pale lavender her mother had picked years ago. Everything still smelled faintly of her, vanilla and roses. It was the only part of the house that Vivian hadn't changed, and Sophie clung to it like a lifeline. On her nightstand sat a framed picture of her mother, smiling wide with her arms wrapped tightly around a younger Sophie. Some nights, Sophie would trace her mother's face with her finger, silently asking her what to do. The slam of the front door downstairs made her sit up straight. Her father. Hope bloomed in her chest, fragile but alive. Maybe tonight he'd notice. Maybe tonight he'd see through Vivian's polished lies and Bella's fake smiles. She ran downstairs, her footsteps light against the polished staircase. "Dad," she called, her voice bright with something that almost sounded like joy. Richard barely glanced up from his phone as he handed his coat to the butler. "Hey, sweetheart," he said distractedly. "Everything good?" She hesitated, her courage faltering. She wanted to tell him. God, she wanted to. But Vivian's warning echoed in her mind, "Don't make trouble, Sophie. You wouldn't want to embarrass your father, would you?" So she swallowed the truth. Again. "Yes," she said softly, forcing a smile. "Everything's good." Vivian appeared from the hallway, her smile warm and inviting as she kissed Richard on the cheek. "Dinner's ready," she said sweetly, looping her arm through his. "I made your favorite." Sophie stood frozen at the foot of the stairs, watching as her father let himself be led away, never sparing her more than a fleeting glance. Later that night, when the house had settled into silence, Sophie sat at her desk with her notebook open. She wrote because it was the only place she could be honest, the only space where her voice mattered. "Dear Mom," she wrote. "Sometimes I wonder if you'd be disappointed in me. If you'd want me to fight harder. But I'm trying. I promise I'm trying. Maybe one day Dad will see me. Maybe one day, he'll remember that I'm his daughter too." She closed the notebook and stared out the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Somewhere out there, life was happening, loud, vibrant, and free. And here she was, trapped in a house that felt more like a cage every day. The next morning brought more whispers. Vivian's diamond bracelet was missing. The staff searched the house, flipping cushions, checking drawers, even scanning the laundry room. Bella cried crocodile tears about losing something so valuable. And Sophie? Sophie sat at the breakfast table, silent, as every eye in the room turned toward her. "She's the only one who was in the living room yesterday," Bella said, her tone dripping with false innocence. "I didn't," Sophie began, her voice shaking. Vivian cut her off with a sharp glance. "Enough," she said coldly. "Your father will deal with this when he gets home." The housekeeper avoided Sophie's gaze. The driver shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. The weight of their silence was heavier than any accusation. That night, alone in her room, Sophie hugged her pillow to her chest and let the tears come. She didn't even bother to muffle the sobs. What was the point? In this house, her pain was invisible. Her heart pounded as she whispered into the darkness. "Mom. I don't know how much longer I can do this." What Sophie didn't know, not yet, was that the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface. And when it did, it would burn everything in its path. The mansion that night didn't feel like home. It felt like a courtroom. Cold. Unforgiving. Ready to convict. Sophie sat stiffly on the edge of the velvet armchair in the grand living room, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. The air was thick with tension, heavy with the unspoken words that hung between her and the woman standing across from her. Vivian, flawless in her silk blouse and diamond studs, looked every bit the picture of control. Beside her, Bella sniffled quietly, a perfect mask of wounded innocence. The sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway pulled Sophie's gaze toward the front door. Her father was home. Her heart fluttered with a fragile, desperate hope. Maybe, just maybe, this would finally be the moment he saw the truth. Richard stormed in, his presence filling the room, suit jacket draped over his arm, phone still in hand. He barely had time to take off his shoes before Vivian glided toward him, her expression grave. "Richard," she said, her tone low and urgent. "We need to talk. Now." He frowned, sliding his phone into his pocket. "What's going on?" "It's about Sophie," Vivian began, her eyes glistening just enough to make her look both vulnerable and strong. "Something very serious happened today." Sophie's stomach twisted into knots. Bella sniffed, clutching a tissue in her manicured hands. "Dad, Her voice cracked as tears pooled in her eyes. "It's my bracelet. The diamond one you gave me for Christmas. It's gone." Richard blinked. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" Vivian sighed, placing a comforting hand on Bella's shoulder. "She searched everywhere. We all did. And then." Bella remembered something. Bella's watery gaze darted toward Sophie, her lips trembling just enough to make the performance believable. I saw Sophie in my room yesterday. She was standing by my dresser." "That's not true." Sophie blurted, rising to her feet. "I wasn't in her room. I swear I wasn't." Richard turned sharply to his daughter, his face hardening. "Sophie. I was in the library." Sophie's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through every word. "I was studying. You can ask anyone." Vivian tilted her head, her expression carefully neutral, but her voice smooth like silk. "Sweetheart, we all want to believe you," she said softly, like a mother trying to soothe a troubled child. "But the bracelet is missing. And you were the only one near Bella's room yesterday." "No." Sophie shook her head violently, tears pricking her eyes. "I didn't take it, Dad. Please, you have to believe me. I would never steal. Not from her, not from anyone." Bella let out a quiet sob, her shoulders shaking. "Why would you do this, Sophie? If you needed money, you could have just asked. We would have helped you." Those words sliced through Sophie like glass. Richard's jaw tightened, the vein in his temple pulsing. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? For this family? For me?" His voice was sharp, each word like a whip. "Embarrassing?" Sophie's voice trembled, but there was a spark of hurt in her tone. "I didn't do anything. Why won't you believe me?" "Because the evidence says otherwise." Richard thundered, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. Vivian stepped in smoothly, placing a calming hand on his arm. "She's been through so much," she murmured, just loud enough for Sophie to hear. "Maybe this is her way of acting out. Grief can make people do strange things." Sophie stared at her, wide-eyed, her heart cracking open. "You're lying," she whispered. Vivian's eyes, cold and sharp, met hers. "Enough, Sophie," she said in that quiet, deadly tone that made Sophie feel small, worthless. Richard turned away, his voice low but full of finality. "Until that bracelet is found, you are grounded. No outings. No phone. No friends. You stay in your room. Is that understood?" Sophie's knees wobbled. "You're grounding me? For something I didn't do?" "You've embarrassed this family," he said without looking at her. "And until this is resolved, this conversation is over." And just like that, he walked away, leaving Sophie frozen in the middle of the room, her tears hot and blinding. Upstairs, Sophie curled up on her bed, her face buried in her pillow, her sobs shaking her small frame. The humiliation, the anger, the heartbreak, it all boiled over in waves that left her gasping for air. Downstairs, muffled laughter floated through the vents, Bella's giggle, Vivian's low, satisfied hum. Days blurred together. Breakfast trays left outside her door. Silence from her father. Whispered rumors from the staff. Sophie's world shrank to the four walls of her room, her only companions the pages of her worn-out notebook and the memory of her mother's soft voice. It was Maria, the housekeeper, who first saw the truth. Cleaning Bella's room one afternoon, she noticed a velvet pouch wedged between two designer handbags. Curious, she peeked inside. Her heart stuttered when she saw the bracelet, the missing diamond bracelet, gleaming in the soft light. Her hands trembled. She zipped the pouch shut and placed it exactly where she found it, her mind racing. She wanted to tell Richard, to finally clear Sophie's name. But fear gripped her throat. She had seen what Vivian could do to anyone who crossed her. She had a family to feed, a roof to keep over their heads. Losing this job wasn't an option. And so, Maria kept the secret. But her silence weighed on her heavier with each passing day. Late one night, when the house was dark and quiet, Sophie sat by her window, knees drawn up to her chest, tears staining her cheeks. The city beyond the gate sparkled with life, but in here, everything was still and cold. A soft knock startled her. "Sophie." Maria's voice was barely above a whisper. Sophie hesitated, then opened the door. Her eyes were red, her face pale. Maria stepped inside, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I just wanted you to know," she said softly, her accent thickening as her emotions threatened to spill over. "I believe you. I always have." Those words cracked something open inside Sophie. She blinked, tears welling up all over again. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Maria squeezed her hands gently. "One day," she murmured, "the truth will come out. It always does. You just have to hold on a little longer." For the first time in days, Sophie felt the faintest flicker of hope. The sun was sinking low, painting the mansion's poolside in hues of gold and rose. From her bedroom balcony, Sophie could hear Bella's laughter drifting up from below, loud, carefree, and cruel. She hesitated, torn between shutting the door to block it out or letting the words wash over her. But something in Bella's tone, sharp, giddy, held her in place. She moved closer to the railing, her hands gripping the cool metal, her heart pounding as the voices grew clearer. "Oh my God, Bella, you did not," one of Bella's friends squealed, her voice rising with disbelief. Bella's laugh rang out, sharp and delighted. "I told you," she said, her words dripping with pride. She just stood there, all wide-eyed and pathetic. "And Dad? He ate it up. Believed every single word I said." Another girl gasped. "So she really got grounded for it?" "Grounded?" Bella snorted. "She's basically on house arrest. No phone, no friends, nothing. She just sits in her room all day, crying. Honestly, it's kind of pathetic." The girls erupted in laughter, the sound echoing across the courtyard like nails on glass. Sophie's breath hitched, her chest tightening. Bella wasn't done. "And the best part," she continued, her tone smug. "I still have the bracelet. It looks so good on me. Vivian says it suits me way better than it ever would have on her. Like, come on, she's nothing. She doesn't belong here, and everyone knows it." "Bella," one of her friends said, a hint of hesitation in her voice. "Don't you think that's, I don't know, a little harsh?" Bella's laughter was cold. "Harsh? Please. She's not even really part of this family. She's just, the helps kid who got lucky. Dad may not say it, but trust me, he knows it too." The words cut deeper than any slap. Sophie stumbled back from the balcony, her vision blurring as tears burned her eyes. She pressed her trembling hands to her mouth, choking back a sob. Her room felt smaller than ever when she sank to the floor, her back against the wall. She hugged her knees to her chest, the laughter from below still ringing in her ears. "I don't belong here." The thought sliced through her again and again, relentless. For the first time, she considered packing a bag and running, anywhere, as long as it was far away from the lies, the cruelty, the house that had stopped feeling like home the moment Vivian walked through its doors. But where would she go? Who would believe her? The hopelessness was suffocating. That night, a soft knock at her door broke the heavy silence. "Sophie," Maria's voice whispered. Sophie wiped at her face and opened the door. The housekeeper stepped inside quickly, her eyes darting nervously toward the hallway. "I heard them," Sophie whispered, her voice raw. "I heard Bella bragging about what she did. She said I don't belong here, Maria. She said Dad knows it too." Maria's face crumpled with pity. She reached out, gripping Sophie's hands tightly. "You listen to me," she said softly, her accent thicker with emotion. "You do belong here. This is your home. Your father loves you, he just can't see through her lies right now." Sophie shook her head. "It doesn't matter. Nothing I say will change his mind. Vivian made sure of that." Maria hesitated, then drew a shaky breath. "There's something I need to tell you," she whispered. "I found the bracelet, Sophie. In Bella's room. I've seen it with my own eyes." Sophie's breath caught, her eyes going wide. "What?" Maria nodded, her eyes glistening. "I wanted to tell your father, but, you know what Vivian can do. If she finds out I opened my mouth, I'll lose this job. And my family," she trailed off, her voice breaking. Sophie swallowed hard, torn between gratitude and anger. Gratitude that someone finally believed her, anger that the proof had been there all along and no one had done anything. The next morning, David found her sitting in the garden, her notebook open but untouched. "You look like you haven't slept," he said, his deep voice steady and calm. She didn't look up. "What's the point?" David crouched down beside her. "Maria told me," he said quietly. "About the bracelet. About Bella." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "You're not alone in this, Sophie," he continued. "We're going to help you clear your name. But you have to trust me." For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in her chest, small, fragile, but there. They worked quietly, carefully. Maria slipped into Bella's room while she was out shopping and snapped photos of the velvet pouch with the diamond bracelet inside. David accessed the security footage from the day Bella claimed the bracelet went missing, footage that showed Bella entering her room, bracelet in hand, long after Sophie had been accused. When Sophie saw the evidence, her hands trembled. "He won't be able to ignore this," she whispered, a mixture of relief and fear knotting in her stomach. "No," David said, his jaw tight. "He won't. And we'll make sure of it." By Friday night, the mansion glowed like a palace. Soft jazz threaded through the air, crystal stemware chimed beneath chandelier light. Richard had invited key partners, a few family friends, and the kind of people who liked to be seen in rooms that smelled of old money and new deals. Vivian moved through it all like a swan, quiet, controlled, adored. Bella was a red-lipped shadow on her heels, the bracelet's absence a secret only 3 people in the house could feel pulsing like a bruise. Sophie stood near the far end of the great room, in a simple dove-gray dress that made her look even more like the girl who didn't belong in photos. Guests glanced, smiled too brightly, then looked past her, as if she were a painting that failed to match the room. David caught her eye from by the doorway and gave a small nod. Maria hovered near the pantry, fingers tight around her phone. The plan had a heartbeat now. Richard rose to toast. A tight speech about resilience, new markets, a future that looked as bright as the stars above this house. There was laughter. Then movement. Then fresh glasses. And in the lull, David stepped forward. "Mr. Williams," he said, voice even, respectful. "Sir, may I show you something important? It concerns the matter from earlier this week." Vivian's smile pinched. "David, not now," she purred. "This is hardly." Richard held up a hand. "If it's about that, we'll finish it tonight. I'm tired of whispers." His gaze slid toward Sophie, heavy with the kind of disappointment that had ground her into silence all week. "Go ahead." David connected his phone to the living room screen. The music lowered to a murmur. Conversations thinned. On the wall, the security camera feed appeared, time-stamped clips from the upstairs hallway. The playback. Clip 1, Bella entering her room around noon, bracelet on her wrist, laughing into her phone. Clip 2, later. Bella leaving her room and heading downstairs, bracelet still on. Clip 3, later still the moment belly deep in the story, the afternoon Vivian had discovered the missing piece. Bella slipped back upstairs alone, a velvet pouch in her hand. She entered her room, shut the door, then emerged moments later, wrist bare, pouch gone. A ripple of voices. Someone coughed, someone else hissed, "My God." Vivian didn't blink. "This proves nothing," she said smoothly. "Anyone could have." Maria stepped forward. Her voice shook, but not her spine. "I found the bracelet in Bella's room, sir. 2 days ago. I took photos, because I was afraid." She raised her phone. On the screen, Bella's dresser drawer, the velvet pouch cracked open, diamonds catching the slant of afternoon light. Photo after photo with fresh timestamps, angles, details no liar could varnish. Bella's face flickered, offense, then fear, then a brittle smile. "So the help goes snooping and now I'm on trial. That's rich." Vivian turned, venom gentle as silk. "You see why we don't tolerate disloyalty, Richard. She's inventing stories to cover for." "Check the timestamps," David said, steady as a brick wall. He tapped the TV. The camera footage and the photos line up to the minute. The room went quiet like the pause between lightning and thunder. Richard's eyes moved, screen, phone, Sophie, Bella, back again, slower, heavier, as if each turn ground against a gear in his chest. "Bella." His voice came out level, and that was worse than shouting. "Where is the bracelet?" Bella laughed, but the sound broke. "Dad, are we really doing this, in front of your little boardroom fan club? It's humiliating." "Where," he repeated, "is the bracelet?" Vivian slid a hand to Bella's elbow. "Richard, darling, you are embarrassing your daughter. That woman is lying." "Enough," David said quietly, not to Richard, not to anyone important, just to the air, as if the room itself needed boundaries. Sophie didn't speak. She couldn't. The evidence made its own sound, like ice settling in a glass. A guest whispered too loudly near the bar, "So it wasn't the girl after all," and another voice replied, low and ugly, "I told you it didn't smell right," blaming her because, the sentence frayed off, but the word hung there, rancid and shared, because she's black. Vivian heard it too. Her mouth thinned. "How convenient," she said, sweet as poison. "We're all suddenly very sensitive. This isn't about race, it's about respect and rules in our home." "Your home?" Richard's head lifted. Sophie finally found her voice. It came out calm, almost tender, the way truth sometimes does when there's no performance left to give. "I told you I didn't take it." That single sentence struck like a bell. Richard flinched. For a second, you could see the father under the CEO, the man who had grounded his daughter without asking her to open both hands. "Bella," he said, softer now. "If you have it, bring it. We will handle the rest privately." Bella's eyes glittered. "And if I don't?" she snapped. "Are you going to frisk me in front of your investors? Maybe ask your driver to pat me down. Maybe you should ask her," she jabbed a finger toward Sophie, "what else she hid, or what she—" "Stop." The word was a whip crack. It didn't come from Richard. It came from Sophie. She stepped forward, small against the marble and the glass, but somehow taller than anyone in the room. "You framed me," she said to Bella, voice steady. "You mocked me. You let him," she glanced at her father, "punish me for your lie." Bella rolled her eyes. "Spare me the speech. Then spare us the performance," David said. "Because if we keep playing, the next clip is you in the guest bathroom taking selfies with the bracelet. The mirror caught it. The camera in the hall caught you going in and out. We can keep doing this all night." A hush fell so complete you could hear the ice melting in the silver bucket. Vivian recovered first. She gave a tiny laugh, all diamonds and disdain. I think we've all had enough entertainment for one evening. Richard, call security. That woman, she nodded at Maria, is dismissed for invading my daughter's privacy. As for the rest. Your daughter's privacy. Richard's voice shifted, gravel and hurt. My daughter's dignity has been dragged through this house like a rug. He turned back to Bella. Bring me the bracelet. Bella's mask cracked for real then. No, she said it like a dare. You're not choosing her over me. She's not even, the word she wanted lodged behind her teeth, but the shape of it was obvious in her face. Finish it, Sophie said softly, almost curious. Say what you've been saying behind my back. Vivian lunged into the silence. This is grotesque. Richard, control your. Bring me the bracelet, Bella, he repeated, and the room felt the temperature drop. For a second, no one moved. Then Bella spun on her heel and disappeared up the stairs. A minute later, the thunder of footsteps. She came back down with the velvet pouch clutched tight, face flushed, mouth hard. She tossed it toward the bar. It hit the marble with a soft, obscene chime. Gasps. A murmur like wind through leaves. Maria made a sound she turned into a cough. Sophie didn't move at all. She looked at the pouch as if it were the tiniest gravestone in the world. Richard walked to it. He opened it and stared as if diamonds could argue their way out of a verdict. Then he lifted his head to the room. My apologies, he said, to no one and everyone. I allowed a lie to live here. His gaze found Sophie. I allowed it to grow. Vivian stepped forward, the picture of icy control. You will not humiliate us further. You will apologize to Bella for this theater. And you will fire them. A glittering glance at Maria and David. Tonight. No, Richard said. One word. A new center of gravity. The room shifted around it. Vivian blinked. Excuse me. I said no, he repeated. We're done pretending this house belongs to your rules. The social crowd started to scatter, but slowly, like birds too nosy to fly far. David turned the TV screen black. Maria lowered her phone, palms damp. Sophie finally exhaled. Richard, Vivian said, voice dipped in honey again, be careful. You'll regret this in the morning. You always do. He looked tired down to the bone. I will regret many things about this week. Your counsel won't be one of them. Bella let out a laugh that sounded more like a crack. You're choosing her. Over me. Over us. She's not even. This time, she finished it. One of us. There it was, naked in the air. No one smiled anymore. Sophie didn't cry. She simply stood and let the room see what strength looks like without noise. I am your daughter, she said to Richard. Whether your wife or her child approve of the color of my skin or not. A few guests shifted, uncomfortable. One woman near the door lifted her chin, eyes on Sophie, a small nod like a candle lit in a church. Vivian's lips curved. Touching speech. Shall we all hold hands and sing? Or are we ready to stop indulging theatrics and deal with the real problem, insubordination and theft of my property? Your property? Richard said. It was a gift, from me, to Bella. And now it's evidence. He turned to the head of household security, who drifted in from the hall, alerted by the boil of voices. Escort Mrs. Vivian Williams and her daughter to the study, he said evenly. No one leaves the grounds until we decide the next steps. Richard, Vivian warned, voice lowering into a register that had bent men before. Think. Lawyers. Headlines. Do you want the world to see you caging your wife and child in your own house? I want the world, he said, to stop seeing my daughter as a suspect in her own home. A small, fierce light. When the study doors closed, the party ended like a match in water. Guests slipped out with murmured apologies, tires hissed on gravel. The house exhaled. Maria moved first. "Miss Sophie," she whispered, eyes shining. "I am so sorry I didn't speak sooner." Sophie took her hands. "You did," she said. "Tonight was enough." David stood at a respectful distance, but his relief showed in the looseness of his shoulders. "You held your ground," he told Sophie. That mattered more than anything on a screen. Richard approached, the pouch in his hand like a hot coal he didn't know where to set down. Up close, the years showed on him, lines grief had carved and guilt had just deepened. "Sophie," he began, voice rough. She shook her head once. "Not forgiveness. Not yet. Just a boundary." "Handle it," she said, and there was no child in that tone at all. "Not for an investor room. For me." He closed his eyes a moment. When he opened them, the CEO was gone, only a father stood there. "I will." He turned to David and Maria. "Thank you," he said, simple and sincere. "You won't pay for doing the right thing in my house." Maria choked on a laugh. "Sir, that is the first time it has felt like your house in a long time." Sophie almost smiled. Almost. From the study, voices rose, Vivian's brittle calm, Bella's disbelief curdling into fury. The house listened. Sophie didn't. She walked toward the terrace doors, into the cooler night, where the air didn't carry anyone else's story. Out under the lanterns, she pressed her palms to the stone railing and let the dark hold her. The garden smelled like night jasmine and possibility. For the first time in weeks, the silence wasn't a prison. It was space. Behind her, the doors opened. Richard stepped onto the terrace, stopping a few feet away, as if approaching a wild animal he wanted not to spook. "I don't know how to fix all of it," he said to the shadows. "But I know where to start." Sophie didn't turn. "By believing me the first time." A beat. Then, honest as a confession, yes. The night took the word and set it somewhere she could find later. Inside, the study door slammed. Vivian's spell, long and intricate, had finally snagged on a fact too sharp to smooth. The house had always been beautiful. Tonight it became true. Sophie straightened and faced the garden. Her reflection in the glass was small but unbroken. Somewhere beyond the hedges, dawn had begun to think about the horizon. This wasn't the end. It was the moment the lie stopped breathing. The mansion was quieter than it had been in years. No laughter, no sharp heels clicking on marble floors, no soft hum of Vivian's practiced hospitality. Just silence, thick and heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. For the first time in a long time, Sophie didn't feel like a stranger walking through her own home. She could breathe, even if the air still carried the scent of tension and the faint echo of last night's chaos. Vivian and Bella had spent the night in the guest wing, separated from the rest of the house, their phones confiscated by Richard's order. By morning, the staff moved quietly, whispers following every step as they awaited the inevitable. Richard sat in his office with David, his lawyer, and the head of security. Papers lay scattered across the mahogany desk, bank statements, property ledgers, and surveillance reports that painted a damning picture of Vivian's manipulation and Bella's entitled recklessness. "She's been draining accounts for months," David said, sliding a report across the desk. "Shopping sprees, trips she told you were for, charity work, private purchases funneled through shell accounts. You've been bled dry, Richard, and she's been smiling the whole time." Richard's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking in his cheek. "How could I not see it?" he muttered. "How could I let her do this to Sophie?" David didn't answer. He knew Richard wasn't looking for one. By noon, the confrontation everyone had been waiting for finally happened. Richard entered the study where Vivian and Bella sat, both dressed to perfection despite the chaos of the night before. Bella's arms were crossed, her expression a storm of arrogance and fear. Vivian, on the other hand, was calm, too calm, her icy blue eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "Richard," she began smoothly, rising to greet him. "We need to talk like adults, not like characters in some tawdry soap opera. Last night was embarrassing, but you and I both know perception can be managed. Let's resolve this quietly. For the sake of your reputation. For Sophie." Richard stared at her, the weight of years of deception sinking in. "For Sophie," he repeated, his voice quiet but dangerous. "You humiliated her. You let your daughter frame her. And you stood there while I punished my child for your lies." Vivian's smile didn't falter. "You're emotional. And when you're emotional, you make mistakes. Don't let this be one of them. You need me, Richard. This family needs me." "No," Richard said, his voice like steel. "What this family needs is peace. And what Sophie needs is safety. Something you've made impossible." Bella scoffed. "Oh, please. She's loving this, playing the victim, acting like she's the poor little princess finally getting her crown. Newsflash, Dad, she'll always be second-rate. She's not." "Enough," Richard snapped, his voice sharp enough to make Bella flinch. He turned to Vivian, his decision final. "You have until tomorrow morning to pack your things. Both of you. You will leave this house and you will not contact Sophie again. Do you understand me?" Vivian's mask cracked then, anger flashing in her eyes. "You think you can throw me out like some disposable ornament," she hissed. "You think people won't talk? I built this image for you. I made you look respectable. Without me, you're just done," Richard said, his voice low but lethal. "This conversation is over. My lawyer will handle the divorce. Security will see you out." Upstairs, Sophie stood by her window, watching the driveway as the car idled, waiting to take Vivian and Bella away. Maria slipped into the room, her eyes soft. "It's really happening," she said quietly. "They're leaving." Sophie nodded but said nothing. She didn't need to. Minutes later, she heard the sharp clack of heels and the low rumble of voices. Vivian swept past without a glance, her designer suitcase rolling smoothly behind her. Bella, cheeks flushed with humiliation, paused for a moment at the bottom of the stairs, her eyes locking on Sophie's. For a second, there was something almost human in Bella's gaze, regret, maybe, or shame, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She turned away, her chin high, and followed her mother out the door. The car door slammed. The engine roared. And then, just like that, they were gone. That evening, Richard knocked gently on Sophie's door. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice soft. Sophie hesitated before answering. "Yes." He stepped inside, looking older than she'd ever seen him. The confident, commanding man the world knew was gone, in his place stood a father who finally saw the damage his blindness had done. "I don't know where to start," he admitted, his voice rough. "I should have believed you. I should have protected you. Instead, I let you feel alone in your own home. And I can't tell you how sorry I am for that." Sophie looked at him for a long moment, her heart heavy but steady. "You didn't want to see it," she said quietly. "And when you don't want to see something, you won't, no matter how loud it is." Richard's throat worked, emotion tightening his voice. "I can't change what I did. But I can promise you this, it won't happen again. This house will be yours, safe, peaceful, and honest. From now on, you come first. Always." For the first time, Sophie believed him. Over the next week, the house began to feel different. The air was lighter, the staff more at ease. Maria hummed softly as she worked, no longer moving with the quiet dread of someone walking on glass. David taught Sophie how to drive, his calm presence steadying her nerves as they cruised along quiet roads. And Richard, true to his word, was present. Not just physically, but fully. He joined her for breakfast, asked about her classes, even sat with her in the evenings to watch old movies her mother had loved. For Sophie, it was strange, this new version of her father. But slowly, carefully, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what had been broken. News traveled fast. Within days, whispers of the scandal swirled through their social circles, how the perfect wife had been caught scheming, how the perfect daughter had been exposed as a liar and a thief. Vivian tried to spin it, of course. She gave carefully crafted statements to anyone who would listen, painting herself as the victim of a jealous stepdaughter and a cruel husband. But the evidence was too strong, the truth too clear. Invitations dried up. Calls went unanswered. Bella, stripped of her status and her endless access to wealth, floundered in a world that no longer catered to her whims. And for the first time, Sophie didn't care. One evening, Sophie sat in the garden, the scent of jasmine wrapping around her like a soft blanket. Richard joined her, sitting quietly beside her on the stone bench. "You know," he said after a long pause, "your mother used to sit out here every night." Said it reminded her that no matter how loud the world got, there was always a place to be still. Sophie smiled faintly. "I think I get that now." They sat in silence for a while, the quiet comfortable, unforced. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Sophie felt at peace. The weeks after Vivian and Bella's departure felt surreal. The mansion, once a place of whispers, tension, and quiet suffering, had transformed. The same walls that had watched Sophie's tears now echoed with something she hadn't heard in years, peace. The staff walked lighter now. Maria hummed softly in the mornings, her steps no longer hurried out of fear of Vivian's sharp voice. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread and brewed coffee instead of cold silence. Even the grand hall felt brighter, like the house itself had been waiting for this, for the storm to clear. For Sophie, it took time to believe it. She'd wake in the middle of the night, expecting to hear Vivian's clipped heels on the marble or Bella's cruel laughter drifting through the halls. But the night stayed quiet, and slowly, she began to let herself exhale. Richard worked hard to earn her trust again. Every morning, he joined her for breakfast, just the two of them. No phones. No meetings. Just a father trying, awkwardly but earnestly, to get to know his daughter again. "Do you still write?" he asked one morning, his coffee forgotten as he watched her butter toast. Sophie hesitated, then nodded. "Every night." His smile was small, almost shy. "I'd like to read something. If you'd let me." She didn't answer, not right away. But that evening, she left her notebook on his desk with one of her letters to her mother folded neatly inside. The next morning, when she found it back on her nightstand, there was a note tucked between the pages. "You write like her. Honest and strong. Thank you for letting me see you." It was the first time in years she'd felt seen by him. A week later, Richard surprised her. "Come with me," he said, leading her down the long hall toward her mother's old study. The door, untouched since the funeral, creaked softly as he opened it. "I had it cleaned," he said, his voice careful. "I thought, maybe you could make it yours now." The room smelled faintly of lavender and paper. Sophie stepped inside slowly, her hand trailing across the shelves that still held her mother's favorite books. "Thank you," she whispered, emotion catching in her throat. Richard nodded, his eyes soft. "She'd want you to have this. And I want you to have it too. Somewhere to feel safe. To create. To dream." It became her sanctuary. Each evening, Sophie sat at the old oak desk, filling pages with thoughts, poems, and plans, not fears anymore, but dreams. The mansion's quiet no longer felt suffocating. It felt peaceful. She found herself laughing again, soft, hesitant at first, then louder, freer. She played the piano in the sitting room, the notes filling the halls like they used to when her mother was alive. She invited friends over for study sessions, something she'd never dared to do before. And every evening, like clockwork, she'd sit in the garden with her notebook, watching the sunset paint the sky while the scent of jasmine wrapped around her like a familiar hug. Outside the mansion's gates, the world moved quickly. Word of the scandal had spread faster than Vivian could spin it. The perfect wife, who had charmed everyone, was now the woman whispered about at luncheons and quietly excluded from invitations. Bella, once the darling of their social circle, found her phone quieter by the day, her calls going unanswered. Occasionally, Sophie would catch a headline online or overhear someone mention their names in passing. But instead of anger or bitterness, all she felt was a strange kind of calm. They were gone. And they couldn't hurt her anymore. One afternoon, Maria found Sophie in the kitchen, her sleeves rolled up as she tried to bake cookies from her mother's old recipe. "You've got flour everywhere," Maria said with a laugh, brushing a smudge from Sophie's cheek. Sophie grinned. "They're not as good as hers yet." "They will be," Maria said warmly. "Because you have her heart." Sophie blinked back sudden tears, hugging Maria tightly. For so long, Maria had been her quiet protector, her silent witness. Now, Sophie wanted her to know how much that had meant. "Thank you," Sophie whispered. "For believing me when no one else did." Maria's voice wavered as she hugged her back. "You never stopped being my little girl," she said. "I just couldn't say it out loud before." Richard tried, in small ways, to make up for the years Sophie had lost. He taught her how to drive, his hands steady on the wheel as she maneuvered down quiet streets. He brought her coffee during her late-night study sessions, joking that it was fuel for geniuses. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, his gaze lingered, proud, regretful, but full of love. One evening, he found her in the garden, notebook open on her lap. "You know," he said, sitting beside her, "your mother used to tell me this garden was her favorite place. She said it reminded her that no matter how loud life got, there was always a corner of quiet waiting for her." Sophie smiled softly. "I think I understand that now." He hesitated, then said, "I bought the land next door. She wanted to build a library there, a place anyone could come to read, learn, or just be. I think we should finish what she started. Together." Sophie's heart swelled. "She'd love that," she whispered. "So would I," Richard said, and for once, there were no walls between them. By summer, the mansion had changed. Richard hosted a party, not for business partners or society connections, but for real friends, family, and the people who had stood by them. The garden glowed with fairy lights strung through the trees, tables laid with food and flowers. Laughter bubbled through the air, warm and genuine. Sophie stood near the fountain, a soft smile on her face as she looked around. People greeted her with warmth, not the polite pity they'd once offered. David raised his glass in her direction from across the lawn, Maria winked at her, pride shining in her eyes. Richard joined her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You look like your mother," he said quietly. Sophie smiled, her eyes glistening. "I feel like her," she whispered. And for the first time in years, the house felt whole. Later that night, when the guests were gone and the house was quiet again, Sophie sat in her mother's study. The lamp cast a warm glow over the desk as she opened her notebook and turned to a fresh page. "Dear Mom. We're okay now. I'm okay now. The house feels like home again, safe and warm, full of love. I don't know what comes next, but I know one thing, I'll face it with my head high, just like you taught me. And wherever you are, I hope you're proud of me." She closed the notebook, tears slipping silently down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from something softer, freer. Standing in the garden under the stars, Sophie breathed deeply, the night air cool against her skin. She wasn't the same girl who had once hidden in her room, afraid to speak, afraid to take up space. She had endured the whispers, the lies, the cruelty, and she had come out stronger, braver, and more certain of who she was. This was her home now. Her life. Her story. And for the first time in a long time, she was ready to write the next chapter. And that, besties, is how Sophie reclaimed her life and her voice. Glowing star. If Sophie's journey inspired you, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Because no matter where you are, or what you've been through, remember this. Your story isn't over, it's just beginning. Stay tuned for the next story. You won't want to miss it.